evidence-based medicine. We have they incorporate they combine traditional medical practices, local practices, and expert opinion. It is known that randomized controlled trials are costly, and they represent a limited control experiment. They are not applicant to broader populations or to a condition beyond the scope of the trial. And we have also systematic reviews, meta-analysis of randomized controlled trials, observational studies, non-experimental studies, and non-randomized derivation studies, and expert opinion that can be used. And about data sources, we have supplements to randomized controlled trials. That means we have patient-reported outcomes, medical resource use, and costs. Large civil trials that may involve prospective randomized assignment that aim to a larger real-world population. Registries that can be prospective and observational cohort studies for a certain disease. Administrative data that are retrospective or real-time data collected mainly for reimbursement purposes. Health surveys, where we collect descriptions of health status and well-being, and of course the electronic health records, where health records of all population is done electronically. In this table, we can see how the contribution of real-world data changed during the year in oncology. You see how much the number of citations were increased during the last decade. And real-world data, they provide valuable information to regulators, sponsors, and clinicians. Primarily focuses their studies primarily focus on collecting and analyzing observational data, and of course offer insights into the practical application of cancer treatment in real-world settings. Real-world data can be used in research and has several advantages, including that they have a larger data set, they have a greater, broader generalizability, and of course a shorter study duration. And we have the ready to work and engage analysis that is a hybrid methodological analysis that combine data from controlled trials and real-world data studies can be used. During drug life cycle, they support drug development, testing, and regulatory approval, and of course, a drug approval from regulatory authorities like FDA and the EMA. They contribute in the post-drug approval. There is a contribution of data in post-marketing commitments, in pharmacovigilance, in identification of subgroups, in dissemination monitoring, in efficacy and effectiveness, and the gap between efficacy and effectiveness, and of course, a new indication for the product. During post-marketing commitments, with the data, we can evaluate treatment experience, and of course, we can capture outcomes from electronic health records. And so we can have an idea, and we can have data how, if there are any toxicity, if there was a need for dose modification of the drug, if there were any hospitalizations, the time to treatment discontinuation, the overall survival, and of course, progression-free survival, disease-free survival. In pharmacovigilance, we use electronic health records with that we examine lab data and we measure the dose delays or reductions and the hospitalizations of the patient. And in patient report outcomes, we have the perspective opinion of the patient about the toxicity of the treatment and how is the experience, his experience with the treatment. Electronic health records and molecular profiles can be combined in order to identify molecular subsets. And of course, we can have patient outcomes by using those data. And we can use them. We can use those data for the off-label use of a drug, and of course to measure the outcomes combined with electronic health records. And we can use also those data for governance and reimbursement levels. We have the pre-approval stage during oncology drug development, and the data will contribute to identify. They will help us to identify the clinical need, to select the correct study site, to give us information to design a study, to design the study, to help us to execute the clinical trial, and also to accelerate the approval of a product. So FDA released the guidance document for industry on December 2021 with some help how to consider and what we have to consider for the use of real-world data and real-world evidence. And they started that the first one, that real-world data is not replacing clinical trials, but we can use them to help us for the support of a new indication for a drug that is already approved, or to support the post-approval study requirement. It can powerfully augment clinical trials. That means that we can have results for the natural history study for a rare disease, or we can use those data as an external control when a placebo arm isn't feasible. And also we can understand with these data, we can understand the post-approval safety and effectiveness of the particular product. Real-world data should be considered long before the start of the study, and also should be part of the entire picture. And of course, they wrote the parameters that we have to consider for the veracity of real-world data. And beginning by relevance, I mean, what they want to know, we have to know what factors influence data integrity and generalizability. Data capture, that means how the study protocol is addressed by and accommodated within the routine data collection, like in an electronic health record or a medical claim system. Missing data, if the data is missing on purpose or is absent because it was never intended to be collected. Validation, how data elements are defined and classified and verified. Of course, study design elements. That means that the data just gives elements for the design of the study and should not define the study. So EMA also believes that real-world data are promising because they substantially increase the effectiveness and the efficiency of all processes in the development and utilization of medicines. That means from research and development to regulatory decision-making, pricing, and reimbursement decisions. And what is the use, the potential use of real-world evidence? They can be beneficial in generating innovative ideas for research in the future in fields like drug development, clinical trials, and health outcomes. It can help us to identify side effects in a more broader population, and to give us a detail regarding the safety and the effectiveness of medicine, so we can support label expansion. And by integrating real-world evidence into clinical development, it can help us to plan and execute a clinical trial because it gives us a great information for specific population, and in this way we can reduce the excessively restrictive exclusive criteria of a study. Also, with the real-world evidence, the data that we have from those, we can have synthetic control arms, especially for cancers that are well-established, that have a well-established standard of care. For cancers that have poor prognosis and low incidence, like small cell lung cancer, and also real-world evidence overall can help refine assessments and facilitate personalized medicine that fits both to the patient and the tumor. In lung cancer, real-world studies have explored the safety and effectiveness of treatments, and especially for patients that were not eligible for participate in clinical trials. Also, they have investigated the burden of lung cancer in relation to treatment patterns and the costs and the healthcare. And with real-world data, we can investigate we can have data for the factors that influence the natural history of disease. And of course, we can identify some variables that contribute to cancer onset in healthy individuals. And of course, we can have some results if environmental factors influence the outcome of a disease. And retrospectively, we can have we can identify variables that contribute to the cancer progression, so from the asymptomatic stage to the symptomatic stage. And this will help us in the future clinical trials to evaluate the impact of cancer screening and the early treatment of patients. And now in the next few slides, I will present you studies with real-world data, and I will start with one from our department. We wanted to know for patients with lung cancer what was the main method of diagnosis and, of course, the cost. And as you can see here in the first table, the main diagnostic method was bronchoscopy. And especially for those with small cell lung cancer patients, that was it was almost 80% of the patients were diagnosed by bronchoscopy. And the main overall cost of the diagnostic method, that means all the tests that our patients had, including for tests for mutation, for biochemical exams, for imaging and sampling methods, it was approximately 700 euros main value, and it was larger for those with adenocarcinoma. And you see here that in 91% of our patients had a CT scan. The diagnosis was made like that. Another study that we had in our department, we wanted to know what is the time from the first symptom to the onset of treatment for our patients. So the results that show that from symptom to diagnosis, our patient had 52 days. For diagnosis to treatment, they had 23 days, and from surgery to treatment, they had 81 days. In relation to other countries, we found studies that were done to other countries. In Canada, there were 138 days from surgery to treatment. In France, there was 3 months from diagnosis to treatment, and in Spain, there was 87 days for a patient to start the treatment from the time that he had a symptom until his first symptom until the onset of treatment. And in our department, patients that were having a small cell lung cancer, their time was shorter. as you can see in this table. And in this pie, we see how much in the last years changed the contribution of real-world data in immunotherapy. In another study from our department, we want to see real-world outcomes, real-world treatment outcomes for patients that had advanced non-small cell lung cancer. And these are the characteristics of our patients. The majority was over 65 years old and male, and they had a performance status of 0 or 1. 95% were smokers, current or former smokers, and around 73% was on stage 4. 67% had no-squamous histology, and only 6% were positive for EGFR or ALK status. And the majority, almost over 50%, had a PD-L1 expression status below 50. And the results was similar with that from studies that show that immunotherapy it was better for patients. So for our patients, patients that received immunotherapy had a better overall survival and a better, as you can see, progression-free survival. And because immunotherapy started from 2016 and later, as you can see, the increase of PD-L1 testing rates that raised from 5% from the beginning of the study, that was in 2016, to 64% at the end of the study was around 2019. And now in other studies, real-world studies, one with, from Corbeau and Associates, that they wanted to know, they wanted to study how immunotherapy affects older and younger patients in real life. And they studied patients with various tumors, including patients with lung cancer. As you can see, the results were similar for those below and above 70 years old, and with the same toxicity, similar toxicity. Another study from Baldini and the Associates, here they wanted to see if the impact, again, the impact of age in immunotherapy. And in the first, here in the first table, you see that patients over 70 years old had a little worse, were a little worse with immune-related adverse events of above grade 2. But you can see here in the second table that the main adverse events was due to skin toxicity. In another study from Faccinetti and Associates, they wanted to see if, how patients with poor performance status, the outcome for those patients that received pembrolizumab as first-line therapy. Of course, they categorized the poor performance status into two factors. For those that their status was due to disease burden, and for those that their status was due to comorbidities, as you can see here in this table. But in the results, you can see that those that had performance status due to their comorbidities had disease control receiving immunotherapy. Instead, patients that had this performance status due to disease burden, they had progression disease. And here you can see in this Kaplan-Meier curves, you can see that progression-free survival was worse in patients with performance status due to disease burden, that was around 1.8 months. Instead, the patients with performance status due to comorbidities had a PFS of 5.6 months. And similar was for overall survival for those patients. Overall survival was 2.8 months for patients that had worse performance status due to disease burden. Instead, patients that performance status was worse due to comorbidities had an overall survival of 11.8 months. Another study here from Grossi and Associates that they wanted to see, they wanted to check if nivolumab has different effects on overall population in certain subgroups. So, as you can see here, overall survival was almost similar to patients, to overall population, with patients that were older, above 75 years old, and to those with brain metastasis. And another study that they wanted to check how patients with autoimmune diseases react with immunotherapy, and how safe can be immunotherapy for those patients. We know that all these patients are mainly excluded from randomized controlled trials. So they had 56, they studied 56 patients with non-small cell lung cancer and different various autoimmune diseases like rheumatoid arthritis, scleroderma, psoriatic arthritis, systematic lupus erythematosus, psoriasis, Graves' thyroiditis, ulcerative colitis, and etc. And they wanted to see, first of all, if receiving immunotherapy exacerbates their autoimmune disease. And as you can see here, from the patients, only 13 developed a flare of their autoimmune disease. And from those 13, only 2 had a toxicity of grade 3 to 4. And from those, only 2 needed to be discontinued temporarily immunotherapy. And what about immune-related adverse events? For those patients, you will see that the majority didn't have any, 62% didn't have any immune-related adverse events. And 21 patients had developed some, and from those 21 patients, 6 had toxicity of grade 3 and 4. And from those patients, as you can see here, only 8 had permanently had to discontinue the treatment permanently. And I am. This is the last of my slides, where I just want to remind you that we have to have a transparent, shared, and scientifically validated evidence of therapies that will work for patients in real-world setting, and that will better enable not only patients but also providers, payers, and regulators in order to have to make decisions that are fit and are more personalized and more cost efficient for our patients. And I want to wish you all a great summer, and if you haven't gone then, to have a great vacations. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Dr. Kokkotou, for this very comprehensive presentation, which really highlights the importance that real-world data has for providing more evidence that can really help the decision-making in a sense. So I have received some questions. I also saw that there was one person, Katrina, who was raising her hand. So I'm going, Katrina, to allow you unmute yourself and make your question to the doctor. So Katrina, the floor is yours.
I'm so sorry, I raised it by accident. I don't have a question. My apologies.
Okay, no problem, Katrina. No problem about that. Okay, I have received some questions in writing. So just to remind you, everyone attending the webinar, so if you want to make your questions, you have two options. First of them is clicking on the participate button, the raise, the hand raise icon, so I can see you and unmute you like what I did with Katrina. And otherwise, you can also type them in the Q&A or in the chat, so I can read them to Dr. Kokkotou. So the first question that I have, which mainly I think you have provided like a kind of a comprehensive answer, but maybe to make a summary, the question says, what future directions do you foresee for the use of real-world data in lung cancer research and treatment?
As I saw in my presentation, we can use real-world data to have a lot of information regarding who's, not to exclude, not to have many criteria to change a little bit the criteria for randomized controlled trials. I mean, they must have patients that I believe that they can have patients that participate patients with some disorders, some diseases, that as we saw in the real world data, they are not so. It is not good to exclude them. I mean, patients with autoimmune disease, we saw that, or patients with performance status of 2. We have to see why those patients have their performance status, or patients with brain metastases. A lot of clinical trials have this exclusion. I mean, if a patient has a brain metastasis, he cannot be in the clinical trials and cannot participate. And I believe those information that we will have, those variables that our data, real-world data studies will provide us, they can give us the strength to fight for patients that are excluded from trials like that.
Thank you so much for your answer. I think you're absolutely right, and I think there has been a kind of recurrent discussion also in the patient community. Sometimes patients need to be very fit to participate in clinical trials, and they don't reflect the reality of some of them. And I think the example that you put on brain mets is one of the good ones. Okay, so the next question is around the privacy and security of patients. So the person is asking what measures are in place to ensure the privacy and security of patient data in real-world data studies.
Well, real-world data are collected from certain areas. I mean, for example, registries. If you have a registry, you know that there is a registry that it is done by the certain hospital, and if you are going in a hospital for a treatment, every patient signs a form that says that agrees to have his data for that reason. I mean, we inform every time the patients that their data are going to be used for a certain purpose. If they like, of course, they can give us their signature, or if they don't agree, they don't agree.
Great, thank you for the response. I can see that new people has joined the webinar, so just to remember that you can still share your questions using the chat or the raise hand icon. So next question is it's around immune checkpoint inhibitors. So the question say, how has real world data been used to assess the safety and efficacy of immune checkpoint inhibitors in those patients with poor performance status? I don't know if you have any particular data regarding these type of patients using ICIs.
I'm sorry, I think I didn't understand well the question. I mean, what was the question again?
So the question is, how has real-world data being used to assess the safety and efficacy of immune checkpoint inhibitors in those patients with poor performance status, in those with poor prognosis, which are not doing well. And if you have any particular data related to real world studies on this.
From our department, we had that study, and we saw that it was well controlled, their disease. Of course, it was similar to the study that I showed you, that patients that had a performance status due to comorbidity, it was better, had a better response with immunotherapy instead of those that was due to burden disease. And I believe every day we, the doctors, we see that. I mean, we give to our patients that they have a poor performance status, we give them a chance in order to fight their disease. We cannot exclude them all. Of course, if you have a person that has a performance, we are speaking, of course, for patients that have a performance status of 2. If we have a performance status of 4, of course, it is out of question that we cannot put that patient under immunotherapy, because maybe it won't help him, and it will be worse for him. We don't know how to react to the toxicity.
Mm-hmm. Thank you so much for your answer. And the next one, I think it's super interesting because it's a very trending topic, and I think this is going to play a major role. And it's about on how technologies like artificial intelligence and machine learning can be integrated in the analysis of real-world data and real-world evidence. And how do you see their incorporation in the upcoming future?
I believe this is the future. I mean, all were excited with that, and we want to see the results.
And if I may ask you just a little bit of extension on this question, have you already have any experience on the use of artificial intelligence in those studies, or any at least preliminary results that you have considered outstanding or surprising, let's say?
Okay, to tell you the truth, not yet. I mean, in our clinical, in our department, we don't have this yet. Okay, but we want to see the result. We want to see this the contribution of those data together, and I believe that will be very positive for us and for the patients, of course, and for us, all the doctors, and not the medical community.
So let's see what the future brings to us. So next question, let me find it in here. Yeah, and this is about a topic that you touched base on electronic health records. And the question is, how do you ensure the accuracy and completeness of lung cancer related data in electronic health records, especially when dealing with different healthcare providers and systems? We all know that sometimes the data in the electronic health record is not homogenized depending on the center and so on. So, but they play a crucial role in real world evidence. So how do you deal with this particular issue or particularity of EHRs?
We try to we will try to have an homogenized system, and to have the results, to have extracted the results, certain results that have all they are common in the electronic health records, and we avoid to include those that they are not in the how to say, they are not in the whole system and the whole studies that they participate.
Great. We are also receiving some messages of people in the chat. Thank you very much for the interesting information. So I think they have found it very fruitful. Let's see. The other one, it's something that you have also touched base during your presentation, which has to do in the cost, or at least the assessment of cost effectiveness on treatments and so on. So the question is, what insights has real-world data provided from your experience regarding the cost effectiveness of innovative treatments like immunotherapy or targeted therapy compared to traditional treatments? What's your experience on this? You have mentioned I think one of the key things is like speeding up the access to treatment, which is good. But when it comes to cost analysis and so on, is something that you are familiar with, and you have any experience on that you can share with our attendees?
Well, in Greece, we have a system. Of course, I'm speaking from my country, but here we have a system that if we want the patient to receive immunotherapy, we have to provide all the details and to explain to our health department, to the government health department, that our patient will have it will be positive for our patient to have this treatment. And from there, they examine that, all the papers and all the things that we send them, and they examine that and they decide if they agree with us, and so they give the okay. Then they give the okay to continue with that treatment, and we have also every certain period after we examine again our patient that to follow him and to see that he has that he has a benefit from the therapy. Then we again do the same thing. I mean, we explain to them, we give them the results from his CT scans, and if it's benefited, then they agree that they have to continue the treatment. So I believe that this is a system that it is a right system. I mean, it is a correct, because we don't give everyone a therapy that it doesn't help him, okay? Just because we want to see that what is the answer that he will have from this therapy. But we provide the therapy with certain to certain patients that we believe that will be benefited. And I believe that no one will stop the treatment if someone is benefited.
Yeah, thank you. And I think just to add up on that, as you know, we in lung cancer Europe, we have been close following very closely the new joint HTA regulation that will come in the upcoming year, because at the moment, at least in the European Union, every member state has the final word on the cost and so on. And although this will remain the same, probably I think real world data is going to play a major role when having these joint assessments done at a European level to provide evidence, especially when it comes to the value that it provides to the patient. Because as you said, the model follow in Greece is different from the one follow in Germany and the one follow in Spain. Some of them are based on cost effectiveness, while some other are based on efficacy and so on. So I think this may play a major role in the upcoming regulation, and hopefully this will ease and speed up the access to innovative treatments to patients with lung cancer. Okay, next question comes from one of our members in Luce, and it's about the role of advocacy groups, of patient advocacy groups. So the question is, how do you think that advocacy groups can ensure that real-world data research remains patient-centered and addresses the actual needs and concerns of lung cancer patients? So yeah, that's the question, because I think sometimes we have a lot of clinical data, but it's about how we can make this patient-centered care solution. So how do you see the role that patient advocacy groups can play in this field?
I believe that it will be a great role, and of course they must provide some ideas also to us and to all the regulatory departments, and to assist in this way for better results from real-world data and more, how to say, more to be validated, more validated results.
Great, thank you. The next one, it's around a specific topic, which is liquid biopsies. So the question is, what do you have any, or do you think about any key advantages and limitations of liquid biopsies that has been observed in real world settings compared to traditional tissue biopsies?
I don't have something in mind, so to answer you that, but in my opinion, I believe that, of course, tissue is best for us, for the clinicians, and because we can check more molecules. I mean, we can have an NGS, and that is something that is limiting for liquid biopsy. For the moment, it is limited for liquid biopsy. But it's something that we can see in the future, and we're very excited to see the results.
Mm-hmm. Great, thank you. Thank you so much for that insightful response. And the next one, I think was in a sense answered more in a general way, but this is specific to EGFR mutation. So the question is, in a case where a patient with non-small cell lung cancer underwent molecular testing and was found to have EGFR mutation, how did real-world data influence the choice and timing of targeted therapies? I think you have answered that like in general terms, but this person is asking about EGFR in particular. So how do you see that real-world data can influence the choice and the timing to access a targeted therapy for this?
Real-world data can help to maybe to give us some variables about those patients. I mean, there are patients that they are EGFR positive and they have brain metastases. So this one, it has a different, we can use a different treatment, different TKI, not a different treatment, it will have a TKI, but it will have maybe it will have a different TKI for those patients with the brain metastasis and EGFR mutated and brain metastasis than those with EGFR mutated without brain metastasis. So it gives us solutions of what we can use for each person. It's like a personalized medicine here. More personalized. Even more personalized medicine.
More personal, more individualized, we can say even. So yeah. Okay, I still have a couple of questions, but I just want to remind those in the attending the webinar that you still have time to send your questions, but I have the last two of them. So, well, it's been also response in a sense, but it's again about the electronic health record systems. So the question is, what are the current challenges and solutions related to the interoperability of electronic health record systems in lung cancer care?
Can you again?
I can repeat it. Yeah. So what are the current challenges and solutions related to the interoperability of electronic health record systems in lung cancer care? So I think this is related to what we were speaking about, switching from several centers, several hospitals, managing the records from the patients in different ways. So how this can be merged. I think you have already responded that before, but maybe this person
we collect from each. I believe that it is done like that. We collect certain questions and certain data. We collect data for certain equations from different hospitals. Not only hospitals, anyway, different clinics.
Okay, that's good. And the last question that I have, but I think it's good. I put it the last because I think it really sums up and summarize the content of the webinar today is how do you think the integration of real-world data with traditional clinical trials can enhance the overall understanding and treatment of lung cancer?
No, I believe a lot. And I believe that because, I mean, in the last few years, some industries change their change the patients that can participate, their criteria, their exclusion criteria. I mean, in the last 2 years, some industries they accept patients with brain metastasis, but of course to be stable brain metastasis. Okay, and this is one that it was done due, I believe it was done due to real-world data, because they show that patients with brain metastasis can have benefits from treatment, and they can be also, we can have them also in the randomized control trials.
Well, thank you so much. So it seems that was our last question, and before bringing the webinar to an end, I would really like to, on behalf of Lung Cancer Europe, Dr. Kokkotou, thank you very much for your willingness since the very beginning, since I contacted you to hold this webinar. I think people, from what I'm reading from the chat, they have found it extremely interesting, and I found that too. And and I know that time is very consumed, but thank you very much for giving us this award in such an interesting topic, and we do really look forward to keep on and continue the collaboration with you in the future.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, and I would also like to thank you all for attending this webinar. I really hope you find it fruitful. Just to let you know that in the upcoming days, the recording of the webinar will be uploaded to our YouTube channel, and you will receive an email, and it will also be shared in our social media for those who couldn't attend live. And just another update, our next webinar will be celebrated on next 4th of July, in which Dr. Benjamin Besse will speak about highlights in lung cancer, especially the news that came from the last American Society of Cancer Oncology Congress, ASCO, in Chicago in June. And with that being said, I encourage you to stay connected to our website and social media channels to get updated on our Lucha upcoming activities. And once again, thank you so much, Dr. Kokkotou, and thank you all for attending. And I wish you all a very, very good evening. See you soon.
Thank you very much. Have a nice afternoon. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you.